According to Hollywood movies, AIs, especially the ones that can think for themselves, are really great for mankind, aren't they? But there's also other movies that paint a completely different picture, and that makes me very, very, very afraid of them, maybe. So it's about time that we look at agentic AI from a cybersecurity perspective. So that's what we're going to do today. Welcome to Threat Talks. My name is Lieuwe Jan Koning, and here from San Francisco, where the RSA conference is happening right now, we are guests at the Venable offices. The subject of today is agentic AI. Let's get on to it. Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity. Let me introduce our guests of today. First of all, Andy Grotto, welcome. Where do I start? You are at Stanford University. You are the founder and director of the program for Geopolitics, Technology, Governance. If that's not enough, I don't know what you do in your spare time, but because you're also a visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution, which is highly influential think tank. And previously, you've been senior director of cyber policy at the White House. You served under Obama and Trump. You are the guy to talk to if we're hunting for answers on emerging technology, on national security, on governance on all this. So really excited to have you on the show here.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here, LJ.
Yeah, and I've been pondering this question, urging to ask you, in 10 years from now, do AIs rule us, humans, you think? What's the chance?
I'm at about a 5%.
5%.
And I don't know if that makes me an AI pessimist or AI optimist.
Mm-hmm. What's the difference?
Well, I learned this from you earlier. So I've got to put a footnote because I'm an academic. I want to make sure I reference my source. An optimist is someone. I'm gonna totally mess it up now. You do it. You said it better.
Yeah, an optimist is a poorly informed pessimist.
That's right.
But you are very well informed. So
I guess that makes me a pessimist.
5% is still 5%, so we cannot close this episode just yet. So we need to hash out this 5%. And let me also introduce Davis Hake. Davis, welcome back to our show.
Great to be back.
You've been here before. You are a cybersecurity and technology expert here at Venable. And you also have an amazing track record. I mean, you're Department of Homeland Security. You've been on Capitol Hill for years. You've been a cyber advisor to the House Intelligence Committee. And but not just in public. You've also the co-founder of a security company, Resilience. Welcome back. We're talking about AIs and about zero trust and trusting. Who do you trust more these days? AIs or do you prefer an actual human today?
I spent my whole career in either national security or cybersecurity, so I have zero trust for humans. I think AI has the potential to gain maybe not zero trust, but a little trust.
Did you take an Uber or did you take a Waymo this morning?
I took public transit in BART, which has very reliable AI systems managing it for many years, but not the cool type of AI, the old type of AI.
The old type of AI. Okay, well, that's a good point, because what is AI actually? I mean, in my introduction, I said agentic AI. Andy, how can you define these for us?
We could spend an entire episode debating a definition of AI.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll offer a really simple, maybe even simplistic one for agentic AI. At least the way I think about it. I think about them as essentially software robots, right? So in the physical world, we have physical robots. Imagine assembly line, each performing some task along the assembly line. AI agents will function roughly analogous to that in software.
Okay. So that's different from what most people today are used to, I guess, because to many people, it's like a better version of a search engine. But you're talking about something completely different.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, their experience with AI so far has been, an LLM, a chatbot, right?
Mm-hmm,
where you ask it questions, you flirt with it, you do whatever you do with a chatbot. But there's obviously a lot more to AI than just these chatbots. There's agentic AI, which we just talked about. There are all sorts of applications in video and other domains that we just don't get the same amount of attention that LLMs do.
So AIs are soon going to take the initiative to talk to me instead of the other way around then?
I think so.
Mainstream?
I think so.
Mm-hmm. So, and this is all going very fast. You do a lecture at Stanford, right? And you talk about how we are in the discovery phase of AI. you just told us a tip of the iceberg, I think, but can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, we're in a moment of rapid evolution and innovation. The U.S. use by enterprises in the United States of AI has increased 40% year over year. The cost of inference for using an LLM like ChatGPT 3.5 has decreased 280-fold since 2023.
284.
280-fold
is the request you do to the
the request that you
not
make.
Learning the AI, not training the AI, but using
it exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
The cost of hardware has declined 30% annually. Power efficiency has improved 40% annually. So we're seeing rapid improvements in both the performance as well as the cost structure of AI. And that's going to mean that we're going to see more and more organizations adopting AI and also feeling a lot of pressure to use AI because of this fear of missing out, FOMO phenomenon that I think all humans experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. David, do you see that among your customer base? People fear of not doing AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So, at Venable team, I'm out here in San Francisco. So rather than a lot of the policy work my colleagues do, I end up doing a lot of work with startups or VC firms or enterprises looking at this technology. And a couple things have changed. First off, I think just over the past year, we've had a complete flood of, more traditional companies now coming in to say, how do I adapt my security and governance to the use of they're talking about generative AI tools, right? Like this next phase of AI, not the, boring machine learning AI that I was working on in my product. But so that's the first one. The second one is that you hear, there's so much money flooding into research and new startups. And, of course, that's even discounting the cost for the power, the actual physical hardware that run a lot of these LLMs. And saying, when are we going to get this money back? When is this investment going to pay off? And I think agentic AI is finally that killer app.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting. So, but because you can think of AI in companies that helping existing processes, text writing, answering customer emails, all that. But it could also be like the core of your organization that is built around AI. What do you see most? What's the most development currently?
Yeah, so it starts with the pilot. I think to Andy's point about discovery. Companies are trying to discover where it fits into their companies. And that's the biggest part. But quickly what they find is that the tools, what they're doing the sandbox to pilot this startup or, pilot this, turning on these features in their cloud service, they're quickly realizing, and this is the conversation everybody jumps to, like rightly after just a few months, is that we need to rethink training. We need to rethink business processes. We need to think oversight and auditing. It's like from square one, because it's not just how are we defending our network, but those same concerns that we have and why we have a zero trust mindset for network security. It's all coming back. AI is touching everything. HR, procurement, the product services you're making for your clients. It's much more broad and deep.
Mm-hmm. So I like to think of IT innovation in waves, and I'm borrowing here from Michael Porter, Harvard Business School professor who's been writing about this since the 1980s. The first wave of IT innovation happened in the 1960s, 1970s around compute, right? And the special power of compute was its ability to process information and enabled, automation of certain business functions. The next wave, loosely 80s, 90s, early aughts, connectivity, right? The rise of the internet. Its superpower was enabling coordination across time and space. The third wave, which I think we're sort of at the tail end, it has to do with smart connected products. This idea that it's not just business processes that are changing; it's the products themselves now have compute and connectivity embedded in them, and it's ubiquitous. This wave that I think we're now at the very front end of, this AI wave, I think the superpower is its ability to deal with complexity, right? AI excels at managing complexity, entropy, seeing patterns, carrying out tasks that humans cognitively have a difficult time carrying out. And so, for organizations that are thinking about how to adopt AI, I always start with the suggestion or recommendation that think about where in your organization you encounter complexity. Now, there's complexity in the sense of like building a microchip, a very, very complex process. But there's also complexities in terms of business functions, where you take a business function like travel reimbursement. There are a lot of steps that go into that business function. It's needlessly complex, and that's an area maybe where an agent in particular might.
And maybe too complex for a single human to comprehend, and therefore you need a team, and they need to work together, and that's slow because the connectivity rate between humans in speech, we measure that in baud, right? Like in the old days. And that now is, what you're saying is solved by an AI, because that can have the visibility in all those different types of data at the same time. And therefore
that's a superpower.
Have the overview.
Yeah, that's a superpower that AI brings to the table.
Yeah, so that's going to change the world. Well, we see all the signs of that. So, and that brings me a bit to the risk or security of all this. I mean, each of these waves also come with their own risk management, security controls. So, what things are failing in the current world of controls? You believe?
Yeah, well, I think like you just put your finger on it. Like, as when humans are communicating on this, we communicate through the air, right? And not to get super nerdy about physics, but it's incredibly inefficient, right? And then our dumb monkey brains have to figure this out, and we go do the job. If we do a bad job, we can be fired, we can be sued, we can be scolded, right? And AI communicates obviously much more efficiently. And when you have AI agents that are trained as expertise to be, it's like the Matrix, like you already know Kung Fu. Like these guys already know Kung Fu. They don't even need any training because they've been pre-trained before you get them in the product. And then they start communicating at speed. You lose some of the same structural framework that we rely on for audit, liability, control, things that we've artificially put in so that we can actually trust the relationships we're doing.
Right? Yeah, so in addition to maybe risks that are caused by AI itself, like new attacks that we see coming up, this is a whole different problem. How do you know whether the result of the AI is actually compliant or whatever you'll call it?
Yeah, it's like a cousin of this problem, right? Because what we're seeing in deep fakes, it's the same issue of trust, where these things have adopted the identity of, let's say, a deepfake of a person used for political misinformation. It's adopting an identity. It's fooling that relationship that we would have one-on-one to interject another person's message or design.
So it will become increasingly important then that we somehow have a correctness factor of an AI, that we somehow can measure this without being able to validate this then.
Yeah.
But that
humans don't run at machine speed.
No, unfortunately.
Yet. I want to offer...
You're still at 5% now?
I'm still at 5%. Yeah, I'm still at 5%.
Yeah, just checking.
I want to build on Davis's point about the governance challenges associated with AI. And my view is that there's an awful lot about AI that's going to raise unique risk challenges. But I always start from the beginning point of, okay, we have a set of incumbent guidance, laws, materials, resources, experience on how we deal with IT risk. And AI is a form of IT at the end of the day. My thinking is we should start by applying that incumbent catalog of resources, and through a process of experimentation, discover where gaps are, where we need to build new ways of thinking about risk management. My concern is that if we get too caught up, and I've spent my career in national security, I'm a risk management guy on the one hand. On the other hand, I'm concerned that we, especially in the United States, Europe, don't adopt AI fast enough. And so pairing the governance message with, I think, the message that, look, you can do this. You need to do this to stay competitive. Otherwise, I think countries like China will eat our collective lunches.
I don't know. I think I agree that technically AI is information technology, but I think one of the challenges with cybersecurity is that it's been viewed too technically, too much of an IT problem, right? Cybersecurity is designed to serve, people that are using computers. So it's like email defense, that's cybersecurity. No, actually, cybersecurity is about trust. And cybersecurity is about building trust in those systems you use to use them more efficiently. And I am concerned that if we do apply the old ways of thinking, which I love, like this AI framework and controls we're building around it, and it's all great. But I do think that like we have an opportunity here where we've seen the failures of cybersecurity to like have a real conversation that we're not just plugging things together. We're trying to build trust in our products. That when we have AI here, we shouldn't attack it from the same, how do we implement controls and document that? Like we have an opportunity to say like, no, that's a good tool, but it doesn't actually matter. What matters is like, is this a trustworthy system? And is it enabling us to sell better products, be better humans, save more time, reduce the mental load from my checklist for the weekend, right?
But if I follow your train of thought here, that you're saying it's broader than just IT. That also means that in securing this and making sure we contain it or
and if we just follow the IT framework, like we had to invent zero trust because IT was broken, right? Like let's take what we know now from a couple decades of being bad at IT and try and apply that as AI is just taking root.
So part of the reason I would argue then the main reason why we are bad at cybersecurity is because the market failed. The market failed to deliver strong enough incentives to users of IT and therefore the vendors of IT to deliver secure products. And if you think about a botnet,
so you can get away delivering a product that is not inherently secure.
Yeah. And the result is we're left having to patch this.
I read some news that now Microsoft is charging
about 20, I think. Yeah,
$1.50 per core per server to hotfix your server.
It's baffling, and to me, a company that believes that it can impose that cost on its customer is not a company that's feeling competitive heat in that particular sector, which comes back to the market problems.
There's a flaw in the product, and you have to pay to fix it, right? That's what. So we were earlier talking about what if, like in the 90s or so, there would be a law that said, hey, you cannot write off risk of bugs in your software leading to security risks, much like the credit cards do, because the credit card companies are actually liable for losses that you make because of abuse of your credit card, right? What if we would do the same thing with software?
So there's a debate, certainly here in the United States, among lawyer nerds like me about how to approach software liability in a thoughtful, smart way. The downside of liability, right, is that it puts brakes on innovation. Makes it harder, in particular for new companies, young companies.
Yeah, and due to your point earlier, we need to be really quick at innovation here because we are in a very competitive situation with other parts of the world, and we cannot lose. Can you? I'm derailing a little bit, maybe, but can you elaborate a little bit? What is that risk then? So, what if we would say we do it a little bit more at the pace of humans, and maybe a little bit more? Stay in control of where our data is and how we train all these models, and the rest of the world advances. What will happen?
Yeah, well, I think if organizations are thoughtful and deliberate in the way they approach how to deploy AI in their systems, I think that these risk questions become a lot more manageable because they can be surfaced quicker and managed proactively, and in the process, hopefully send a market signal to vendors to deliver more secure products.
Yeah, okay. So if we do it right, it doesn't delay us too much. That's what you're saying. Like it would be if we would say to the software companies, "Hey, listen, you're liable for all the software bugs you're producing." Right. So we could do it in a clever way.
Well, so liability is a powerful tool for apportioning responsibility, and the usual way of thinking about liability is you put liability on the actor, the organization, the person who's in the strongest position to address whatever problem gives rise to liability. And in software, that's usually going to be the vendor, but not always, because organizations, and you see this in data breach after data breach, make all sorts of mistakes in their own internal risk management. And so figuring out where that line is between the vendor's responsibility and the end user's responsibility is hard. My own view is, for the last 40 years, it's skewed too far in the vendor's favor, and that we need to ask the vendors to take on more of that responsibility. The question then becomes how. Liability is one way, but so is competition, promoting competition so that companies feel competitive pressures to build cybersecurity in. I also think that getting customers to demand more security is just as important because vendors won't deliver more secure products unless they get that market demand signal. And there, I think you're talking in many cases about regulation because for a lot of sectors of the economy, their IT risk decisions don't just affect them. It affects a broader ecosystem of stakeholders who have no say in that organization's risk decision. That's a classic market failure problem where regulation is at least worth considering.
Yeah, and the regulation is just for the country that issues the regulation, right? Or maybe the Western world can do it collaboratively. But what if the US government would say, you would advise the US government, listen, we need to do at least these minimum controls for AI?
Yeah.
And they would enforce it?
Well, I would. So I don't think it's possible to build a legal framework for AI unless you first figured out cybersecurity, data protection, because those are the ingredients that have to go into an AI law. So you think about the way the Europeans have approached regulation, right? The AI Act is built on the NIS2 endeavor, GDPR, DORA, that whole ecosystem of laws that underpin the European regulatory apparatus. We don't have that in the United States. We've taken a much more sector by sector approach. So there are gaps. And I think until we fill those gaps, it's hard to build a comprehensive framework for AI regulation.
I've got something to build on that. And my daughter, who's in elementary school, she's like, build on that. Like when you hear a good point, right? Build on that. So, I used to be a public servant. Now I'm an entrepreneur. I have always felt when I was a public servant that our job was to control risk. And so if we had a decision of executing or de-risking, we would tilt to de-risk. I was also in national security, defense, spy stuff. So of course, de-risk, right? But being on the entrepreneurial side has fed a lot of that of me and you make products too, right? You would agree that the customer is always right, but not necessarily always correct. They may not be informed enough to know necessarily, especially in security, right? We build secure products and we have to explain that.
No, sometimes you have to explain, help a customer put the right question in front of us. Because you said before, customers need to demand secure software. Well, they don't.
That's right.
No.
So they also don't ask a question for secure AI or harmless AI or whatever, right?
Yes.
I don't see them.
But I would push back on the AI because I do think that the explosion and the very public way in which we can work with LLMs through all these different apps, and in every app that has it, it's showing people some of the issues around trust when it wants to be helpful, so it gives you an answer, and that answer is completely fake. It's adding it's adding cars.
Yeah, but that's on the quality of the answer.
Yes.
But we've also established that those AIs overseeing lots of different subjects at the same time. They come to a conclusion that's in a way magic to humans.
Yeah.
So how are humans going to validate that it's correct? We can't.
Yeah.
So how can we ask this question? We need an AI to do it for us, maybe.
It's a very pulling apart that complex system. I think we have a lot of work to do to figure that out. But in security, we've been focused on just delivering secure products, whether or not the customers have asked for them or not. In security, it's our job to make them secure. I think, and the reason why I say AI shouldn't follow IT is because that's been our paradigm. And frankly, it's been really hard selling cybersecurity. It's always a cost center. It's saying that, it's a vitamin approach, right? You got to eat your vitamins, eat your broccoli so that you're healthy later, right? That is a hard approach as an entrepreneur. It's a hard approach to sales. But with AI, we say, do you want a good quality product? Do you want a product that is going to give you answers that are relevant, that is you can trust to take tasks off your hand? Well, that means that you need to not only have a value reason, a real important value reason, but you then also need to think about how do you build in trust? What does that look like? And then how do you train your people to use it correctly? I think AI is letting us learn from the problems of selling cybersecurity to starting first with value and trust. And then saying you want a trustworthy product, you want a good product, then that means it's got to be designed.
But how are you going to know?
Yeah, but see, it all comes back to whether the customer, in their conception of what a good product is, includes security as one of those quality attributes. And that's not always the case. And I think in some cases it's because there's an underlying market problem, right? The customer can deploy a system and not bear the full consequences of a failure, right? So you think about a hack, of where a leak of personal information is released. That hurts lots of people, but they probably didn't have much say in the organization that had that data's data protection practices, right? We call that an externality. Unless the vendor, or sorry, the customer cares about those externalities, they're not going to spend money to reduce them, right? And so figuring out how to get organizations to internalize that cost is the only way that I think customers will demand secure products. There's this George Akerlof, winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics, wrote a really famous paper in the 1970s about a market for lemons. And the intuition is, if you imagine a market for used cars with the same car, except some cars have a hidden defect in them. So good cars, cherries; cars with a hidden defect, lemons. If the owners of those cars put their cars in the market, if customers can't tell the difference between lemons and cherries, they're not going to want to pay full price for a cherry because there's some chance they may get a lemon instead. Well, the sellers of those products, of those cars, are going to begin to think, well, I have a cherry. Like, if I'm not going to get full price for my cherry, why would I even put it in the market? Why would I put it out there? Yeah. And so you end up with a market flooded with lemons. And there's a lot of thinking in among people who think about the economics of cybersecurity that in many parts of the software ecosystem, there's a market for lemons because customers can't discern quality.
I'm fully on board with that. So how can we change that in AI then? Make sure we have cherries.
Well, yeah. So it comes back to figuring out how to incentivize users of AI and vendors to internalize the costs, the downside risks of their decisions. Because then, economic logic is those entities have an incentive to manage that risk, to invest in reducing that risk.
Okay, but in today's practice, the discussions we have on security of AI, well, there's two mainly. One is the new attacks that are possible thanks to AI, because you can mass mailings are much better. For example, the hallucination of projects that you include in your code, that ChatGPT says, "Hey, this library is for you," and it doesn't exist, and then the attack, but it will give that answer a couple of times, and therefore an adversary registers this project on GitHub, those kind of things. That is relatively trivial, I think, how to cope with that. But the biggest risk that people see is that their user base is putting text like contracts, confidential quotes or whatever into a chatbot saying, "Hey, listen, iron out the errors for me, spell check this for me," right? So that's the conversation we're currently having, and it is in itself not something that a regular user is going to demand to be secure, right? Our company also makes software products that incorporate AI, but we chose to host those on our own stuff. We do not use external APIs for this, so we can be sure that no data ever gets out. I know because I can see the packets not leaving, right? But this is an exception. So I don't currently see, even at this simple level of not sharing your data to places where you might not want it, to be a requirement at all. So, and if we're talking about more complex things that humans can't even comprehend, how are we ever going to require that? Is that possible at all? Or should we simply say, yeah?
I think it's much simpler than that. And
good.
You're exactly right. It's complex and hard, but I think the challenge, and I'm only I'm like a temporary academic where I just teach like once a week, not like a full academic like Andy. But I had a student who a couple years back, he wrote a paper before all the LLM boom and fun. He wrote a paper on adversarial AI, and he began his thesis by saying, like, why is this important? Why is this anything more than just like some cool thing about poisoning attacks or having to build in guardrails? And he was saying, because in the future, every restaurant's going to have their own model, which will tell them, based on past data, what the weather is like and how many burgers they should make and how much beef they should order to do it, right? And he says that as people start using this, the attack surface is going to build, and they're going to see the issues and challenges firsthand. And then we're going to need to think through security of this. Right now, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're just in the phase where we're having clients come to us and say, we're finishing that pilot. now we're ready to start thinking about how to secure it. And I think that with AI, since it has been, like you said, Andy, it is a new wave of how we use technology. I think we need to use it. We need to encourage people to use it, because by using it, by seeing issues that come up with around understanding that, hey, how does it, when I put in my name, how does it know some of this personal information about me? Was this someone else that uploaded this, trained on it?
From a development perspective, I would call this testing in production.
Yeah,
I have a follow-up. But
it is a bit.
1 second, because we also have. I have to talk about the treasure hunt that our viewers and listeners are used to. As you know, you can get a cool Thread Talks T-shirt from us shipped to you. The first 200 people that respond will get one shipped. So include your address, please. The code, I'll say it only once. It's 250701. So email that to code@thread-talks.com, and you'll be the proud owner of one of those shirts. So to build on that, you're saying let's just play?
I'm saying let's think about piloting it. Like, this is how companies are adopting it for home use. Like, we've been piloting random little apps here and there.
I'm terrified about it.
Yeah, let's, we all are. But, new knowledge discovery is a bit scary. And I think when you get back to the economic problem of how do we secure these, if we continue to say, like, don't use it until it's secured, maybe we should say use it, but in a safe context, right? And then open it up as we secure it and we think about our own security realms.
So I think it's possible for organizations to be very systematic in how they approach AI adoption, right? So
yeah, you said deliberate use of AI, right?
Deliberate use, yeah. So if I'm right that AI's superpower is
we're now getting to the solution section of this episode.
Wait for it.
Wait, are we going to solve this problem?
Stay here. Yes. We're not going to solve it. Yeah.
Yeah. So AI superpower is machine speed and complexity, right? And if an organization starts from the proposition, okay, within my organization, where is there excessive complexity? Whether that complexity is a result of information overload, humans being too slow to act, too many steps, whatever it is, right? Start there. Where is there excessive complexity? And then I think, okay, look at your competitors, right? Do they face the same constellation of complexity? Then from there, I think the organization can ask, okay, where can I find competitive advantage in potentially using AI to tackle one of these domains of complexity?
Yeah. So
and then
as
you build
opposed
an
to,
action
hey,
plan.
guys.
Management is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as opposed to, hey, guys, we have this chatbot subscription for the company. Go use it. Good luck, right? So you're saying you got to have like a purpose. So it almost sounds like it needs to be on the decided on board level what the strategy here is. Do we need an CAIO?
Well, it depends on the type of experiment. So experimentation is an important use case, right? Some organizations that may be how they discover the sort of second and third order applications. But there as well, it's okay. Don't experiment without some business purpose in mind. Some underlying.
Well, you have to start with value, right? Like if you're just tinkering something, like it's most important to understand how you're actually going to get value out of something and why it's worth experimenting. I think one of the fatal sins, and maybe this is because I've gone completely from Homeland Security to entrepreneur, but like we try to secure things for the purpose of securing things when really we should be securing them to make the business operate better. And when you talk to, so many CISOs that have been wonderfully trained from like the hard technical background, they're like, why do you secure it? It's like, well, because I have to secure it. It's like, okay, but what does your business do? What do they sell? What does the worst day of their business look like when things go wrong? And then you get a conversation about risk, because risk is probability. And it's the same thing with using AI. Why do we want to use it? We need to have that conversation, figure out that question before we can say how we.
But what I see often today is that we use it because it helps us everywhere. Making a to-do list, rewriting a report, coming up with ideas for the name of my next product, all that. So it's everywhere. Then there's not much purpose today that I see in our own company, but also in customers. How I see that and the questions we get. So, what you're saying, we should focus this more then.
Yeah.
Would that be your advice to who should drive this? Is that the CISO currently, the CIO? Who should we task with this?
I think it depends on the type of organization, how they're structured. I don't think there's a one size fits all answer. I do think that AI adoption should be there ought to be senior leadership guiding and overseeing the vision. Because it's that important. Beyond that, who's in charge, where in the org chart, again, it's just going to depend a lot on the company, their legal structure, their size, their market, all sorts of other
Okay.
Andy, you missed the chance. What we're supposed to say is it should have an AI CIO new position, and then we're going to create a whole new job category on LinkedIn.
There you go.
That was not my intention. Okay, clear. And let's briefly go into a little bit a peek in the future to close this episode off with, please. So we talked about current challenges and how organizations should focus more, be very purposeful, right? Where does this go from now? You in the beginning you said the prices are going down, speed is going up. It's not plateauing in any way at the moment, right? It's still so AIs will become, compared to our human thinking level, magic a little bit. Huh? I always think of what if we would go back to the Romans and have Julius Caesar show him an iPhone and or call someone on the other side of the field, or that's magic to this person. We're going in that direction a little bit, right? We have to somehow keep up with this. So what can we do to let's focus on the technical perspective a little bit, or the IT perspective. What should we do to make sure that we stay in control in our companies and our countries?
Yeah, well, first off, I have to say we can't have a tech conversation without referencing the Roman Empire. So very on brand with Julius Caesar. But no, I think when we're thinking through securing these systems, you've got, your CEO says, hey, these guys are already using AI. We need to use AI too. You have to first clearly define the business use case and do some thoughtful survey around the company, how you're going to use it, what you're going to use it. And then you have to start thinking about what's your risk tolerance for failure of that system, right? And then you can understand how to secure it. Because you look at some of the example with the airline company whose, public-facing LLM was promising full ticket refunds to people, right? Like maybe that's not a case where you want to hand over that authority. Because, I think the fundamental problem with generative AI systems is that as we add agentic AI, start hooking these into other systems and allow agents to talk to agents, is that what if the system has greater authority than the user is allowed to access it? And fundamentally, as we're thinking from security architecture, that's the core problem. Is like, who's going to be using it? And does the system's authority to implement change exceed that user's ability that's interfacing with it?
Yeah, it's hard to. Yeah, I've always said it's hard to train an AI. That's the whole point of it, of course. But what I mean is, if this AI is performing a function in your organization and it misbehaves, doesn't follow procedure, what do? Fire it, shut it down. I mean, what's the consequence here, huh?
Well, we talk a lot about LLMs, and chatbots are one of many different types of AI. It's the one that gets the most attention because ordinary people have access to them through their web browser or an app. And history has shown that when users discover a new tool, they will use it if they find value in it. And so this gets into the whole shadow IT challenge, where if organizations aren't proactive in having guidance for how their employees use these tools that are available at home, right? Then they expose themselves to all sorts of risks. So I'll give you. I sit on the board of a video game studio, and we decided that, look, we cannot use LLM to generate content for the video game because of copyright issues. That's a hard directive, right? That's board level guidance to the creatives that mostly comprise the company. That type of, I think, intervention is going to be increasingly important as more and more people get comfortable using these tools. That's different though than a system that's actually operates on an enterprise IT infrastructure. It looks more like a router or a switch than it does Microsoft Office, which everyone has at home. The challenge is different, and that's where I think the real competitive advantages for AI probably reside more in that latter category as opposed to the former category. Because at some point, everyone's going to be using LLMs. It's a commoditized technology in the same way that word processing is a commoditized technology. No company derives a competitive advantage anymore from using a word processor, right? The early adopters did, and that's where we are with LLMs. But I think that's a commodity technology. A lot of organizations have to discover something that's more unique to their business environment that solves a particular complexity challenge that they face.
Thinking of what you're saying, I think what it feels like is we are on this enormous wave that we kind of understand, but not fully, and we also recognize that we can't really understand where the flow is going to go. But it's certainly there. It's all around us, and if we don't take it, we'll like it's not possible to have a company today without a word processor, right? It's similar to this. So that's the one thing, and the way to combat this thing is to be to set the direction as a company and to be really specific on what you want and help your users to do so. So that's probably a big task for many companies today, and need a lot of help with that. And but they need to be aware that this is really necessary to do so. I think if I hear you two talking. Gentlemen, thank you so much for these insights. I'm not sure if I rest better after this.
No,
5%.
I certainly rest.
What's your
less good after I talk about AI security?
That's
no, but I think it's like I said, it's possible. I think for us to trust the AI system. We already do, right? I mean, as Andy said, AI is already used in the background in a lot of things. We already do trust AI more than people. I think that thinking about the ideas of zero trust, where you have to enforce visibility. I think that's what we've got to do. We've got to make visible why we're using it, make visible how we can trust it, and then train the people to use it.
And we know that the majority of users in companies and also at home are not going to do this. So it's a big responsibility for leadership to make this happen, both in private and public sector, probably.
And there's a saying that is attributed to the late, great coach of UCLA basketball, John Wooden. He used to tell his players, be quick, but don't hurry. And I think that's good advice for how organizations should approach.
But don't hurry.
Yeah, approach AI.
And on that wisdom, we'll close this session of Threat Talks. Gentlemen, thank you so much for all your insights. To our viewers and listeners, thank you very much for tuning in today. If you like what you saw today, please like us on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. That will help us spread the word further. You can also press the subscribe button, and the advantage is that next Tuesday you will have access automatically to the next episode of Threat Talks, because we have one every week. And here from the magnificent city of San Francisco, I say goodbye to you and thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by Onto It Cybersecurity and AMS-IX. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.